Welcome to Beyond the Fire Drill, coaching leaders to think and lead strategically. Today, I'll walk through specific coaching questions that HR and L&D leaders can use to shift leaders from reacting to daily demands to leading with clarity, priorities, and strategic intent. So I'll start with some brief introductions of myself and the framework we'll be walking through. And then we will present some coaching questions around starting with why, defining purpose, identifying strategic forces that influence strategic thinking, and lastly, how you can continue to apply this as an HR L&D leader without building a whole new program or system. Start by sharing a little bit more about me. Hello, my name is Chelsea Side, and I'm the founder and CEO of Talent Praxis, a boutique leadership development company where I work as one of our executive coaches, facilitators, and the primary advisor to our company partners. I'm also the co-founder of Trio Coaching Academy, an ICF accredited coach training academy where I help build the curriculum, shape the business strategy, and serve as one of the primary instructors and mentor coaches. My background is primarily in leadership development, HR, and business operations. Early in my career, I worked in internal roles across a variety of industries. And then in 2017, I transitioned into executive coaching. First, I co-founded a venture-backed coaching company, and now I run my own boutique firm. So across this work, I've designed custom leadership development programs for more than 50 organizations and coached over 245 leaders. Today, I'm going to be sharing my best practices to help leaders move from reactive task execution to intentional strategic aligned leadership. For the workshop today, you can scan this QR code for a written resource summarizing all the key insights and a recorded walkthrough of the session, and also an invitation to schedule a complimentary consultation. If you're working on developing more strategic leaders within your organization, I can help. So what are the hidden costs of fire drill leadership? Well, fire drill leaders aren't failing. They may actually be some of your seemingly high performers, but they're operating inside the wrong time horizon. When urgency replaces direction and speed replaces clarity, activity starts to replace alignment. So teams look busy and your KPIs are moving, but there's no sustained positioning. Execution without strategy creates motion, not momentum. And that distinction is what we need to coach into leadership systems. So let's start by defining our terms. Strategy is an intentional plan sustained over time, and leadership is inspiring others towards common goals. So naturally, strategic leadership is not charisma. It's not personality. It's an intentional plan, a set of behaviors to inspire others towards shared goals in a sustainable way. This gives us something concrete that we can coach towards. So what's the shift that leaders need to make? Well, reactive leaders focus on what's urgent, what's due, and what's next. Strategic leaders ask why this work exists, what larger systems they're operating inside of, and what long-term results they're building towards. The coaching shift is moving leaders from task orientation to systems orientation. So to help leaders move from reacting to thinking strategically, start by anchoring them in purpose. To do this, we use coaching questions grounded in Simon Sinek's, which you may have seen, Start with Why. So the first tool we're using today, as I mentioned, is to develop coaching questions that are inspired from strategic leadership in Simon Sinek's Start with Why. If you're unfamiliar with the framework, you can scan the QR code to watch his TED Talk. At its core, the idea is simple. What a team does and how it operates should be driven by why it exists in the first place. Inspired leaders communicate from the inside out, starting with a purpose, which then shapes how they operate and what they produce. People don't buy what you do, as Sinek says. They buy why you do it. We're not using this as inspiration. We're using it as a coaching structure to help leaders articulate purpose in a disciplined way. Let me show you what I mean. So when you're coaching leaders to think more strategically through why, you're going to start with these three simple questions. What does your team do? How does it do it? And why? Most leaders can answer the first two really quickly. The third is where strategic thinking starts to begin and can be more challenging to respond to. So elevating the conversation with more questions. What impact does your work drive? How does it connect to mission, vision, priorities, or KPIs of the org? And if your team disappeared tomorrow, what would the organization lose? Asking more coaching questions to help them answer and think more about the why. Those questions will force leaders to move from describing activity to articulating contribution. And the most common challenge that I hear when doing this is when centralized goals are unclear. And the leader says something like, "We don't have centralized goals." And that I find is more of a coaching opportunity. You can coach through it by asking, what can you learn about priorities from executive updates? What does the website suggest about the company's mission or vision? What product or service does the company deliver and to whom? Getting them to start thinking strategically around what the company's priorities or goals are. Even without a formal strategy document, direction is visible at organizations in patterns. Strategic thinking requires inference. Leaders cannot wait for perfect clarity. They must interpret signals and act accordingly. So, strategic leaders either know or can intelligently infer the company's vision and priorities. Then they can clearly articulate the purpose their team plays in advancing those priorities. And they use that clarity to guide conversations, decisions, and how they direct their team. Purpose becomes a decision filter. It shapes what gets prioritized, what gets pushed back on, and how work is framed. That is the behavioral shift we are building before we expand into broader strategic forces. So once leaders know or can infer company priorities and can articulate their team's purpose, the next step is perspective. The second tool we're going to use today is Porter's Five Forces to expand perspective beyond the team and into the systems shaping performance. Strategic leadership requires both clarity of contribution and awareness of external impact. So Porter's Five Forces examines buyer power, supplier power, threat of new entrants, threat of substitutes, and competitive rivalry. These five forces shape how organizations compete, position themselves, and sustain advantage. They influence pricing, leverage, differentiation, and long-term viability. We're not diving into theory here. We're actually using this as a lens to help leaders see the strategic forces shaping their environment. If you're unfamiliar with Porter's Five Forces, you can scan the QR code to learn more. But now I'll be showing you the actual coaching questions I use to walk through it. So first at the company level, strategic questioning starts with the buyers. So thinking about the company as a whole. Who are our buyers or our customers? And this should start to clarify for the leader who holds power and defines value. Then the suppliers and the stakeholders. Who do we depend on as a company to operate effectively? Then moving to the competitors. Who are we positioned against, right? Who are the organization's top competitors? Next, the substitutes. What alternatives could replace what we offer? And finally, new entrants. Who could disrupt the industry entirely? This progression moves from immediate influence to broader strategic environment. It's helpful and sometimes easier to complete the strategic forces exercise for the company. So I tend to start at a company level and next dive to the team level. So when you're applying forces to the team, you're going to ask, again, starting with buyers, who are your buyers? Who relies on your team's deliverables? This may include the company's external customers, but it will absolutely include internal teams. This clarifies who relies on the output of their team's work. It should help leaders identify where strong collaborative relationships and consistent feedback loops are required. If leaders don't understand how their buyers experience their work, they can't adjust their approach to deliver more impactful results. So the next force at a team level are the suppliers and the stakeholders. You could ask, who are your suppliers and stakeholders? Who do you rely on for products, services, information, or deliverables? This includes everything from the tools they're using to their individual team members to the internal teams that provide them essential inputs. It clarifies where dependency exists. Leaders need strong collaborative relationships with these stakeholders, but also a long-term strategy to ensure that they're getting the best results from their suppliers. So that may include succession planning for internal team members or skill development. Could be strong vendor relationships to understand updates and escalate needs. And definitely intentional partnerships with internal suppliers to ensure high quality information and deliverables. So, strategic leaders are always managing their supplier relationships very deliberately. And then the last force to apply at the team level are the substitutes and disruption. So, what substitutes exist for your work, and what new entrants or structural shifts could disrupt them? At the team level, this is not about internal teams. Internal teams should be thought of as collaborators or suppliers. Instead, think about substitutes like automation, AI, external consultants, software platforms, or process redesign. Then consider new entrants or structural shifts, reorganization, outsourcing, new leadership priorities, or emerging technologies. Leaders should know why their work exists internally and stay aware of innovation. Strategic leaders do not resist change, they anticipate it, they adapt early, and they optimize it. So, when leaders understand their buyers, suppliers, substitutes, their behaviors shift. They strengthen relationships with key buyers because that's where the value is defined. They intentionally manage supplier dependencies. They invest in collaboration, capability, and long term partnership. They monitor substitutes and emerging disruption. They stay aware of automation, innovation, and structural change happening within the organization. And they align priorities to long term positioning, not just short term urgency. This is where strategic thinking becomes visible in a leadership practice. So now that we've built clarity with why and perspective with forces, we need to translate this into repeatable leadership behavior. So you start with why as a reframing tool. Instead of operational check ins, elevate the conversation. Instead of how are things going, ask how whatever they're sharing is aligned to their team's purpose. Ask how the initiative supports company priorities. Ask what long term goals it advances. You are training leaders to connect activity to impact in real time. That shift alone moves from reacting to positioning. And you can use questions to surface strategic forces in real time. Especially once you've already walked through the framework as a whole, it's easier to use impromptu in moments. Who relies on the output of this work? That'll clarify the buyer and where the value is defined. What are you most dependent on for success? That'll surface supplier risk and critical dependencies. If you approach this completely differently, what could that look like? That opens it up to substitutes, redesign, or innovation. And what structural shifts could impact your success? This will build awareness of disruption before it happens. These questions train leaders to think beyond execution and consider positioning. There's really no need to create a new initiative here or brand new program. These are questions that you can embed into existing leadership rhythms. Use them in your one on one coaching conversations, use them in quarterly planning discussions, use them in talent reviews and succession planning, use them in leadership workshops. Strategic thinking becomes normal when it becomes habitual. So, when you consistently coach in this way, leaders begin to think beyond urgency. Trade offs become clearer, key relationships strengthen, change is anticipated rather than resisted, and daily work becomes aligned to long term impact. This is a cultural shift through disciplined questioning. So this is the foundation for strategic leadership: purpose, clarity on why the team exists and how it advances company priorities, perspective, awareness of the strategic forces shaping performance in their environment, and practice, disciplined questioning that turns insights into behaviors. Your role is to inspire thinking by embedding these questions and frameworks into leadership rhythms. But leaders must step into it by making intentional choices, strengthening the right relationships, and aligning their work to long-term impact. This is how strategic leaders are built. So if you'd like to go deeper, you can again scan the QR code. You'll receive a written resource compiling all the key slide insights and speaker notes, and you'll receive this recorded walkthrough. If you're looking to intentionally develop more strategic leaders at your organization, I want to offer an invitation for a free complimentary consultation. This is about building disciplined strategic thinking at scale, and I can help. Hope to talk to you soon.